Prashakam, everyone. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the house. On behalf of the Guru, he wanted me to extend that. And today we have a special treat for you. We have with us guests from the Adidam Sangha. We have Angela, Charles, and Leo. And they're going to speak to us. Their topic is going to be Satsang. So would you welcome?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It's such a treat to be here. I'm very honored to be here and actually humbled to be here. So it was a wonderful invitation that Bhagwan Ra extended to us to come visit, share with you, and talk with you about Satsang. I know that, my name is Charles, by the way, and Angela to my right, and Leo. And I know that all of you already no, so that's God calling. Yeah, I have a friend who sets his watch for every 15 minutes and it beeps to remind him about God. And I thought that was a pretty interesting way to do it because we all tend to forget. And it's good to be reminded in whatever way we can. And this is one way to be reminded, is just to be with other people. So that's why we all come together at least once a week to remind each other about the Guru, about Satsang, about the Divine. So it's just a really sweet treat to be here with you. We would like to offer a gift to Bhagwan Ra Africa. This is the most recently published edition of The Knee of Listening. It's been revised by Adidam Samraj. This book was originally the first book that he published. It was published in 1972. And Bhagwan Ra read it soon after that when he was in India. And he found it an interesting book, and he's continued since that day to be conversant with Adidam in terms of reading Adidam's teaching, and found it very helpful. So we wanted to offer this gift to Bhagwan Ra. So. One of the things that Adidam Samraj is constantly reminding his devotees is that satsang is not something that we do. It's his gift to us. And that's a very important thing to constantly remember. And again, that's humbling. It's easy for a spiritual practitioner to think that he or she is doing something. Especially when the grace of the Guru begins to flow into your life, you can think you're doing something really great. And it's very important to always remember that satsang is about the company of truth, being with the Guru, being with the Divine. And it's his grace that flows into our lives. It's not because of anything we've done, not because of any predisposition to deserving it or anything else, but it's a gift. And so I'm sure all of you have felt the gift in your lives of Bhagwan Ra and as your Guru. So that's something we all share. And it's also, I want to say again, a wonderful treat to be able to be in a room with people who know what you're talking about when you talk about the Guru, about satsang. Because it's not common knowledge here in our Western world. It's a secret, precious secret. And I want to tell everybody about it, of course, and we all do, but it still remains a secret in our Western world. I'd like to read a brief paragraph from one of Adidam's first books, originally called The Method of the Siddhas. And he's revised that title to call it the method of the Richira avatar, the Siddha method of the Richira avatar. This book was also published very early in Adidam's teaching work, about 1973. Satsang is a natural process in which the contraction that is our suffering is operated upon by the Guru. The disciple is preoccupied with his search, but all the while, the Guru is acting upon his fundamental, motivating dilemma and strategy. And there are two tendencies by which the Guru is always being confronted by his disciple. One is the tendency to seek, one is the tendency to seek rather than to enjoy the condition of satsang. And the other is the tendency to create this contracting circle, this cult, this ritual of fascination and unconsciousness. The Guru has only one resort in either case. It is satsang, his simple relationship with his friends. So there is no more precious gift to the devotee or the disciple than to be in the company, in the presence of the Guru. And of course, there's the physical presence of the Guru, and then there's the spiritual presence of the Guru, which, as we become more practiced and more familiar in our practice, we're able to actually contact the spiritual presence of the Guru. My confession to all of you is that I'm a beginner. Even after 20 years in the graceful company of Adidam Samraj, I'm still a beginner. And being in the physical presence of my Guru is the greatest gift I've ever experienced in my life. And I just wanted to say a few things about a trip I took to Naitumba, which is our island in Fiji, Adidam's hermitage sanctuary ashram in Fiji, where I went on a meditation retreat in 1992. Of course, it's a beautiful place, and one can be seduced by that beauty. But it's also a place that's infused with Adidam's presence. The whole place, the whole island is. And day after day, all of us on retreat were gifted with the opportunity to sit in darshan with him, sometimes as long as an hour, hour and a half at a sitting. And it's clear to me now, and it wasn't clear to me then, that he was operating on me, that he was working on me, my cellular level, in all kinds of ways I didn't even understand or comprehend at the time. And luckily, we don't have to completely understand it or comprehend it. The Guru's work goes on no matter what our comprehension of it is. I think ultimately it's mysterious and incomprehensible. Adidam has said that many times. I'm utterly incomprehensible to you. And so I suffered a lot on that retreat, actually. I felt uncomfortable in many ways. But day after day, he would grant us darshan, grant us the gift of his presence and the viewing of his bodily form. And it wasn't until I actually returned from my 3-week retreat that people told me that I was transformed. And I started going, oh, maybe I was transformed. I didn't even know it at the time. But I also realized later that the point wasn't about me being transformed. The point is that I went there and laid myself at my Guru's feet. That's what the practice is, to continually return to him and his company, his satsang. It may feel all kinds of different ways in the moment. Part of what Adidam does, specifically in his satsang with his devotees, is he reveals to us the self-contraction, which is his word for the ego, the refusal, the not that we bring to the Guru. It's what we're always doing. And we can't undo that. Only satsang, only the Guru operating on us can undo that not. Try as we might to be loving or spiritual, even nice. I mean, we can improve ourselves to a certain degree, right? But ultimately, we've all come to the realization that we can't do it ourselves. And satsang is the gift and the reminder that we can't do it ourselves. I'm going to turn it over to my friends, Angela and Leo, to talk about some of their experiences with Adidam.
Charles? Okay. Well, when we were talking about, when we got Bhagwan Ra's invitation, before when people come to speak for groups of his students, they've been sort of more lecturers. And we didn't really have any of us who were really lecturers within Adidam. And we thought that actually what we could bring here was some stories, some actual stories of our experiences of satsang with our Guru, and that, you know, that could be mutually inspiring. And I was actually really looking forward to coming here because I heard that you were all very serious students, you know, and serious practitioners. And I always very much enjoy meeting people who can inspire me in my practice. And hopefully some of our stories can inspire you too. One of the things that I thought might be interesting is that I have a somewhat unique experience among my friends here anyway, is I had a guru before Adidam, and I experienced his death. He actually physically died before I came to Adidam as a devotee. And I always like to tell this story to anyone who has a guru because I think it was certainly very instructive to me. And what happened in that situation was that I studied with an American man named Rama, or that was his spiritual name, as a guru for 7 years. And that was, you know, it was a very profound relationship. It was a slightly different relationship than the one I have with Adidam, because he was a very different teacher. You know, his methods were different, the practices we did were different. But the relationship was still the guru-devotee relationship, you know. It's still a matter of the master giving you the gifts and transforming you, and doing what the master says. And what I found that was interesting was, I think, for some reason, ever since I first started studying with that teacher, I always was afraid I was going to lose him. I just always had this fear in me that I was going to lose him, and it kind of inspired me to try harder in a lot of ways. But it was also limited me because I was sort of all, because I was kind of uptight a lot, you know, and trying too hard sometimes. But he did end up dying. I think it was 96. He actually left the body, and he'd been ill for a while, although he was a fairly young man. And what was very interesting about that was that the relationship didn't end there. And I guess I'd been afraid that it would. I found that I had, you know, the relationship, the love that you feel for your guru is deeper than any love for anyone else. I mean, it could, I think it was sort of like maybe you're worse than your whole family dying at once, you know? That feeling of attachment that you have to the body of your guru is profound. And what I found that the day that I actually heard death, I felt something I'd never felt before, which was I felt stark reality. I felt like there was absolutely nothing in the conditional realm, like the world, that could console me, that could make me feel better, because it was completely real. And I remember just sitting in my car for maybe a couple of hours crying, thinking, there's no place to go. There's nothing I can do. I can't eat anything or drink anything or talk to anyone or go any place that's going to make me feel better. I am absolutely in this feeling. There's no way out of it. And that was, I think, the time I actually started to maybe be a little bit of a spiritual practitioner, because I've experienced no consolation, which is something Adidam talks about a lot, actually, that you really need to be inconsolable, because if you are able to be distracted, by the things of the world, then you're not going to be serious in your practice. I really enjoyed Bhagavan telling me that you guys meet in cemeteries and funeral homes. I thought that was really cool. I actually, my first guru actually advised us to visit cancer wards, and I did that for the last, because I was, such a sort of frivolous person, I guess, really, in a lot of ways, that I felt that the need for me to go deeper and to not be so consolable. And I took that advice, and I actually volunteered in a cancer ward where children were dying for about a year, and that helped. But really, it was this experience of, him dying that was the greatest gift that he gave me, I think, probably. And then what was interesting also is that there was I missed seeing him in person so much, but I felt like he was with me all the time after that. I mean, I felt like it was actually even a deeper relationship in some ways after he died. And so, of course, I wanted to go on studying with him, but he actually communicated to me that I needed to study with Adidam and become Adidam's devotee, and that's what I did, a couple of years later. And that's taken a whole different path for me, and it's been profound in whole new ways. I've had a few. I've been a student of Adidam's for less time than these two men, and I've been a student for a devotee for about 4.5 years, and I've been blessed to see him a great deal, actually, because he's at times while I've been a student been very gracious with letting us be around him and receive his darshan, sit in meditation with him, offer him gifts. And one time when I went on a weekend retreat in his company after I'd been a devotee just for a little bit of time, I got to go to the movies with him, which isn't usually so common, although I guess in earlier years he used to be much more personal with his students and kind of be more social with him. Now he's much more formal and really reminds us a lot of the formality of the relationship, and it's so easy to treat the guru as an ordinary man if you see him in a more social circumstance. So a lot of the lesson for us now is to really learn the respect that other cultures already know of the, between the guru and the disciple. So in this situation, we got to go to the movies with him, though, which was unusual, and he really taught me something very interesting. And I found actually consistently that the relationship, satsang, is a moment-to-moment, all-the-time thing. That it's a continuous conversation, just a dialogue between yourself and your guru. There's this internal instruction that if you're allowing yourself to be open to it, can always be there. And so when I was at the movies with him, there was a whole group of people who were serving around him who went to the movies, and I happened to kind of sneak in with them sometime. And I was invited, actually. I felt like I was sneaking in a little bit. And we all sat down in rows all around him. It was very interesting to watch how the people who normally serve Adidam were set this up for him. They set it up so that he didn't have to experience any of the abrasiveness of this very public place. That he could be shielded from that because as a realizer, he's extremely sensitive, very, very psychic, and he needs to be protected from some of the more abrasive elements of the world. So not that he couldn't handle it, but we want to give him that gift. We want to allow him to remain in his samadhi because that benefits us, it benefits the world. And so the way we were sitting in the movie theater, we bought a bunch of tickets beforehand so he could just walk in and not have to stand in line and buy a ticket or anything like that. And we sat all around him, like in 3 or 4 rows, maybe 5 rows in the theater, and he was in the middle and all of his devotees were all around him. And some of his more advanced students were sitting right with him, and his daughters were there too. And I was extremely uptight. I was terrified because I ended up being in a row, the row right behind him, maybe 4 seats away. So he's, just a little bit away from me. And I was a very new student, and I thought that I can't think a thought. He's going to hear all of the evil inside me. He's going to know, he's going to know I shouldn't be here. So I was totally terrified. And I was sitting there just kind of rigid, going, oh, God, how do I stop my brain from thinking? And and then I thought, well, I can't sit here like this. He's going to feel that, And then I sort of went through my neuroses for a little while. And then a few minutes later, just sort of gracefully, I just noticed how we were sitting, just that whole configuration of how we were sitting around him. And I realized that I wasn't there for me, I was there for him. I was there I had a service to do, and that was to be a buffer, just sort of an energy, happy buffer around him in that place, in this theater, this very public place with all these different consciousnesses and worlds that had been there. And I just relaxed, and what happened in that moment was my attention went off of myself. And that was one of the first real lessons I got from Adidam, is to take my attention off of myself. And it was so simple. It was actually incredibly simple, and it completely was his grace, because I was incapable of doing it. And when I took my attention off myself, I quite naturally, just very easily, just gave it to him and was focused on something higher than myself. And the ego became undone, I just became engulfed in his happiness. And I had a profound spiritual experience then, that he gave to me. I felt, the way that Adidam works is, and every guru has different ways of working, I know, is that he actually has a descending force that's very, very distinct, very, much him that you experience. If you're experiencing him, it's very clear that it's him. And so I felt this descending force of energy coming all through my head, through my body, and I saw, I could barely watch the movie at all, of course, but I saw in my mind that there was this white light, this huge shaft of light just filling my body, and it felt like it pushed everything out that was impure and just filled me up, and it was so pleasurable, so blissful. And after the movie, after experiencing this for a while, I felt something I'd never felt before, which was a complete absence of wanting anything, not wanting to go anywhere, not seeking, I guess. This was the word that Adidam uses that I didn't even know yet then, actually, at that time. But I just felt completely free of any, it felt to me like any contraction. I'm sure I still had some, but I just loved my friends. I was so happy to be there. There was no dilemma. There was no problem. It was wonderful. And of course, what Adidam teaches is that our tendency when we feel, any ego's tendency is that when we feel some sort of blissful experience is to take it like a dog with a bone and go run with it and kind of chew on your bone and forget all about the guru and not stay in that satsang relationship, the moment-to-moment continuous relationship. And he teaches us that that's absolutely not what we do, because you feel the moments of blissful experience, and you have to stay, as he puts it, in the room with him. You have to stay with the process in order to actually grow, because then there are moments of purification, times that it's absolutely not fun at all and not blissful, that if you don't actually still continue that turning of the attention, as Adidam puts it, if you don't stay in the practice that you do, then you aren't going to really grow, because the blissful moments are just part of it, and the hard moments are part of it too. It's all a process. So I'll just talk for a few minutes more. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the retreat that I got to go on last year in Hawaii, which was a more profound experience of teaching. And I felt that there was a lot of instruction that I got just from being with my guru. It was actually 3 weeks that I got to be there and meditate with him every day, and we're chanting, which is part of our practice. And for hours every day, it was pretty much just doing spiritual practice and a little bit of service. And it was very, very profound. It was something I hadn't experienced before, to be in that kind of circumstance for that long. It was completely blissful and completely hell at the same time. It was both of those things, because we would have these experiences in the morning. This is my experience. Some people had totally different experiences. I think Leo just had bliss, so he's a nicer person than I am. The retreatants would all get to go and sit in meditation with Adidam for usually about 45 minutes each morning in this special type of transmission sitting, he called it. And we also would chant to him for hours, and we'd meditate for, I think, 2.5 hours every morning. And then we'd actually end up seeing him maybe 3 times every day. And it was very, very intimate and very sweet. And it was a rather small group of people, actually. I think 17 at the most, between 10 and 17 people the whole time I was there. So it was wonderful. I mean, it was really wonderful. And what I experienced was that I would feel this transmission of him, very, very strong energy transmission, to the point where I would just feel intoxicated, completely drunk on bliss, just happy, just the essence of happiness would just be filling me. And you would think that that would just last and you'd stay that way, but no, of course not. Immediately the ego would kick in, and I would be kind of doing whatever numbers that I do. And I found that since the process was allowed to go so deep, and it was such a long period of just being in this spiritual practice circumstance, it sort of seemed like the transmission went deeper, and it sort of dug up more, deeper stuff, deeper purification than it would normally. And so I found that there were things that I was learning about myself, and the patterns that I animate with people, and the way that my ego is, more than I'd ever known. Things that I'd never realized were showing themselves. And I found that I actually shouldn't have even been on that retreat. I wasn't really quite ready to be there, because I wasn't quite purified enough. But I found that that after that retreat, I actually felt I understood his teaching about satsang more than I had really ever understood it before. And that was just that, this process of purification, that you just have to stay with that. And also that he bases the practice he gives us on a couple of different principles. One is that what you meditate on, you become. So if you're meditating on a realized being, divine being, you are becoming more and more like that person all the time. And that's the moment-to-moment continuous practice that we do as devotees of a realizer. And that's true with anything. You hang out with people, you start to look like your friends, you marry somebody, you have a dog, you start to look like your dog. That's just the way that's the way people operate, and it's the way it works with the Guru too. It's very simple, really. And so our practice is to always give our attention to him, to not do ourselves, because he teaches that the ego is an activity, as Charles was saying. It's actually something you're doing. It's not something you are. It's something you constantly do. And when you can stop doing it by doing something else. And the something else is to focus on something higher than the ego, in our case, Adidam. And he also says that what you don't use becomes obsolete. So if you're not doing yourself, if you're not animating these patterns that are part of all of our makeup as egos, then the patterns themselves can drop away and become obsolete and become purified, or become maybe not as, you don't necessarily have to always do them, because you can transcend them in the moment at times by this practice. So that was what I had to say today. Turn it over to my friend Leo here.
Thanks, Rachel. Well, just to echo, it's such a delight and pleasure to be here. We appreciate the opportunity very much. And as my friend Charles read a quote from one of Adidam's earliest works, here's a later quote that talks about satsang. All of the great Siddha Gurus, of whatever real degree of real God realization, who have taught and transmitted the inherent divine truth of reality to living beings, have given their devotees the graceful gift of satsang. Satsang has always been the essential activity of the great Siddha Gurus. The great Siddha Gurus have never come merely to give a conceptual teaching, to fabricate a myth, a belief structure for the mind, a patterning of egoic mentality. The great Siddha Gurus have always brought and given themselves. They have always entered into relationship with their devotees and altogether with the conditionally manifested worlds. That satsang relationship is the very structure and the outwardly observable sign of the devotional and due course spiritual process. If you are my formally practicing devotee, satsang with me is spiritual life. In that process of satsang, I, by all my avataric divine spiritual means, live my devotees. So, for all of us who practice with a spiritual master, this relationship is the critical key to our liberation, for sure. And what is remarkable to me, I've been a devotee for 8 years of Adidam, Avatar Adidam. And in fact, my first retreat was not with Adidam, but I was too much of a beginner. It was actually led by my friend Charles in California years ago. But his capacity to create a special relationship with all of us who have different personalities, different karmas is remarkable. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things personally about how Adidam has enabled me to have a relationship with him. He talks about something called the Sacrament of Universal Sacrifice, in which the devotee gives their attention, their feeling, their breath, their body in service to the Guru. But the Guru, in turn, and even prior to that, gives everything. As he just said, he gives himself. And so the whole, there's a tradition within our way of giving gifts to Adidam. The gift he's truly looking for from us is the gift of our spiritual practice and our spiritual advancement, and also gifts of bringing the good news of his avataric incarnation to other people. sometimes we give material gifts as well. And it was the year 2000. I was, in the spring of 2000, I was feeling a little distant with my relationship to Adidam, and asked, well, what's the one kind of material thing that means more to me than anything else that I could give him as a symbolic gesture? I couldn't exactly pack up my life. Or one of my kids.
Even if you wanted.
That's right. So, and it was clear, there was one material possession I had that meant so much to me. I had, before coming to Adidam, for many years had practiced in a Buddhist tradition. And along the way, once when I was doing some work in China, had acquired a Buddha. It's a very beautiful bronze Buddha. It would sit on the floor. It'd be about this high. Very intricate, made in India. Somehow it made its way to China, and then there was a long story of how I was able to acquire it and it came to the U.S. And so I thought, well, I'll give him this Buddha. And so with the help of friends, Charles principally among them, it was crated up and shipped to California, where he was at the time in a sanctuary in Northern California. And I flew out, met the cargo plane, was able to get it and then offer it.
We're talking about crated up at least 300 pounds. Okay, this is no small.
Yeah, so this is a big one. And at the time, the formality was that I didn't physically. He wasn't physically present when I gave it, but I gave it to some of his assistants, and given its size, they had to take it and get it uncrated and this kind of thing. And it was at a high feast we call Guru Purnima. It's in July every year. We celebrate the presence of the living divine. And at the moment that I decided to give it, and through that whole process of working to be able to make that happen, it broke open something, some resistance in terms of my being more available to him in some kind of way. So it was his gift to me. It seemed like I'm giving him a gift, but it's really he's giving me a gift. Do you know what I mean? And then later, as part of a fundraising effort our community was doing at the time, there were some photos of our guru that were being auctioned off. And one of the photos, we saw this, we were online at our community in Chicago, was a photo of Adidam, and right in front of him is this Buddha. And it was a very large one, so we all chipped in and were able to purchase that. And then, through another process that was fairly involved and fairly mysterious, it became possible that he gifted the Chicago community with this Buddha back as prasad. And it took a couple of years to get it back. And so now in the basement of our ashram, the next time you come to visit, you'll see the photo of Adidam with the Buddha and the Buddha together. There was another time when Angela and I went on the same retreat, the same retreat that Angela was just talking about. It was in Hawaii. And again, at this time, it was like, what can I give him that would just be a gesture? And I had another Buddha from, this one was much smaller. It was about this high. And a very beautiful antique Nepalese Buddha made in Nepal in the 1700s. And I bought it in 1979. I was in Bloomington, Indiana at the time, and there was a religious goods shop that was run by an American teacher called Swami Chetananda. And so I didn't have enough money for the Buddha, and so I could only make an offer for about a partial amount. But somehow he accepted that, and allowed me to buy it. So I was a Buddhist, I was a Zen Buddhist at the time, and so it was an object of veneration for many, many years for me. And so at this time, I took it to Adidam, to Hawaii. And, you know, it was after 9/11, so I was hand carrying it to make sure I could get there safely, and the security guard said, "You can't do this, it's a deadly weapon," and it was, but somehow we finally were able to work through that. So I was able to gift him with that as my arrival gift. And as Angela's saying, this retreat where he totally gives of himself in terms of this transmission he was doing with his devotees, the only thing I can say is it'll break your heart. It'll just break your heart that the love of this God-man to give everything to his devotees is just utterly transforming. And so all of us on that retreat felt him working with us so intensely, and so it's like looking at his eyes and seeing infinite love. And so it had been a very powerful retreat for me, and toward the end of the retreat, I was told that he had taken that Buddha and put it on his nightstand next to his bed, and had a new flower put on it every day for the time that I was on retreat. And he finds ways to do that with each of us in our own different ways. And so that whole process illuminated or was instructive for me in terms of what satsang is about. It seems like a relationship, but in truth, it's about him. It's about the divine. It's about the guru. And the deeper that relationship goes, the less of me there is, and it's just him. And it's a miracle for all of us to have the gift of a master. It really is. I remember just a saying from my Buddhist days that the Buddha once told, a disciple asked about having a master, and the Buddha said, well, first of all, to be born in a human body is extremely rare. To be born at the time of a spiritual master is rarer still. And then to come into the company of a spiritual master is the rarest gift a human being can receive. So I celebrate and honor the fact that we are all given the gift of a spiritual master.
Taking questions? Anybody have any?
Sure.
Anybody have any questions?
For Angela. Angela, you said that prior to coming to Adidam that you had a master, and when your master died, he contacted you or had some intercession with you. Did at any time when that occurred, did you have any misgivings about it? That's an unusual request of a master that has traveled to the other side. I know in our tradition, when the master leaves the body, then we continue to develop a relationship with the master. And it becomes even that much more heightened, so I hear. And so, what was your initial response when that happened? And was it only one time that it occurred, or did it occur over a series of times, and then you knew, oh, this must be, because I would feel some sense of betrayal in a sense. So I'm curious about how it occurred.
That's a really good question. Well, what happened was that, well, as I mentioned, after he died, I actually felt this incredible intensification of his presence. It was almost like his body wasn't there, but his spirit presence was there way more than it ever, just as you mentioned in your tradition, the relationship intensifies. And I've read that that's true with masters in general, that a lot of times after the master dies, a lot of students actually become realized. There's that intensification. As long as the relationship has been cultivated to a deep enough degree while the master was in the body. That's obviously a very key part of it, the key part of it. What happened with me is I felt more, I'm sort of like, just as a character, I'm sort of intensely loyal. It never would have occurred to me to even think about going to another guru. It wouldn't have, you know. In fact, I heard about a couple of other students of this guru who had gone to check out other gurus, and I was really angry at them because I felt like they were betraying our teacher and that they were betraying his sacrifice, you know, with us. And I still honor that teacher greatly. And what happened though is I just had this, I felt like I could talk to him. I mean, it was like he was beside me all the time. And that lasted for several weeks. And there were all kinds of very interesting things happening. It kept raining and raining. It felt like the earth was crying. People were nice to me. Like, just everyone was nice to me. It almost felt like they could tell that this was happening.
In New York.
Yeah, in New York. I was living in New York. No, but it was very, I mean, it was very profound. Very profound. And I called in sick to work and just cried for 3 days. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't move, you know, I couldn't do anything. If I hadn't had a dog, I would never have left the house because he made me go out and walk him, and he probably saved my life. But at the same time as I was experiencing this intense human grief, there was this bright presence that was just always there. And my meditations were really deep. You know, I was it was a very deep process. What happened though is a few months, I'm not even sure about the sequence. I'm not sure how long it was, but it was within a few weeks or a couple of months after he died. I had a really profound meditation, and there were actually, I think, things leading up to this, but it still sort of surprised me. I mean, I think there had been a lot of little signs that there was going to be my life was going to take a different turn, and that was just sort of the path that I needed to go on. And I wouldn't listen to any of these signs because, again, I'm very kind of stubborn and loyal, and just as a human, I couldn't think about going to another guru because it just would be a betrayal, and I couldn't do that. But I had this experience while I was meditating where his picture, I was looking at his picture while I meditated, and his picture came alive, and it was talking to me, and that wasn't a normal experience for me, but in the moment it felt normal. It was so, but it was an experience such that I had absolutely no doubt at all that it was my imagination. It was that real. And I mean, you know, I can imagine things all the time, and I do. And I kind of, if I have any doubt about it, then I know it could have just been me imagining something, but this was not my imagination, and I was absolutely 100% clear of that in that moment that was the case. And he said to me, sort of in words but sort of in feelings, that I needed to be in a bhakti path. He had a different method of teaching, and that I was sort of changing and needing this other type of work done with me. And I needed a different teacher. And I said, who? And he said, Adidam Samraj, who I had hardly ever been heard of before. So it was in that moment I was surprised, but I wasn't in an emotional space. But afterwards I became very, very emotional about it. I felt really betrayed, and I felt really rejected. I felt like maybe he was sending me back to preschool because I wasn't quite cutting it or something, But I found that none of that was true, and that it was just his, I was such a hard-headed character that he sort of needed to really make it clear 100% because I wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. And the interesting thing is that there are a whole group of his students, that teacher's students, who have come to Adidam. And not all of them. Rama had about 2,000 students when he died. He'd had many, many students over the years, but no, it wasn't 2,000. No, it was like 200. Yeah. There was a very small group. It actually had been narrowed down to a very small group. And there was a group, about half of us were people who'd been with him for a real long time, like 20 years or something, and then the other half had been with him for less than 10. We all sort of came in together, and he said we were just sort of a karmic group. We sort of had this karma together. And most of those people actually became students of Adidam and had experiences somewhat like mine. Everybody sort of had their own different way it manifested. But that was just something that he apparently did. And Adidam actually, really talked to us a lot about who our teacher was and how they were related to each other, and had sort of a karmic connection together and stuff. So that's what happened. And a lot of students still stayed with Rama, and I respect that they're progressing in that practice. And that was what they were meant to do, I guess. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
It's a good question.
Anyone else? Okay.
The House of Ra and Bhagwan have
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Master has also asked that we do a special gift of prasad today, so I would ask that Sahaj would, since that is your savor, if you would. also like to invite you to sit with us in meditation, which is what we do following